I'm Jordan.
And I'm Wyman.
And you're watching Speedway Pulse Media.
You got us doing?
Yeah, I got you now.
All right. How you doing, Dave?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
I can't complain. Welcome to our first interview here with Speedway Pulse Media.
Yeah, absolutely. It's glad to be part of the whole program when it's starting out and everything. That's great.
It's awesome to
when did you guys come up with this idea to start?
Honestly, I was just sitting in my room and I was like, no Wyman here. He's a diehard racing fan like me, and I was like, well, it'd be fun just to like get another media account out there just so people see racing media and stuff like that. Because I mean, obviously, a lot of people love racing, so.
I think it's really taken off big here in the U.S. with like the Formula One Drive to Survive series that came out, and people now see racing as a bigger thing than what it used to be.
Yeah, the Drive to Survive thing that really helped a lot with the motorsports side, and it's like now like so many people are race fans that didn't have a clue what racing was before. So I think it's really good, and it's great you guys are starting this out. It's awesome. Good for you.
Well, thank you.
We'll go ahead and start here. Our first thing is, we like to ask drivers, what kind of got you into racing? What was kind of your big, first big step into it?
Yeah, for me, it was, my dad, David, he raced professionally for 40 years. Right. And so I always kind of grew up around the racetrack. So I never really had to kind of search for my passion in a way. So it was really when I was growing up, my dad was always at the track. I would always go with my mom to watch his races and everything. But his story is a bit different. I'm going to kind of go and just talk about his story really quick, because his story honestly is a lot more interesting than mine, where he grew up, didn't know a single thing about racing. And his parents, his dad worked at a railroad company. My grandfather worked at a railroad company for 42 years. And my grandmother, she was a stay-at-home mom that, had dinner on the table at 5 p.m. sharp every single day. So my dad, one day, he saw an ad for Petit Le Mans in a magazine, and him and a couple of his buddies went out to go watch it. He'd never heard of Petit Le Mans before. He'd never heard of any kind of racing. He was, at that point, I think, 23, 24, something like that. And so he goes to watch the race, and as he's going on the track was when they took the green flag. And I don't know if you guys have been to Road Atlanta. It's downhill turn 12 area. It's just the most surreal thing, right?
That's an awesome thing to watch.
Never seeing the racetrack before in your life, and that's the first thing you see is the start of Petit Le Mans coming down that hill. Thousands of horsepower totaled up. And from that moment on, he was just hooked. And so he starts working 3 jobs. He was newspaper delivery, Domino's delivery, and worked at McDonald's.
Oh, wow.
Spent every single penny that he had on his first Formula Ford car. And so he started just doing the Formula Ford stuff. And then, he started to kind of slowly get more and more into it and everything. But obviously coming from a family with little to no money at all, he went to go to start networking at all of the Grand Am races. And so he went to start just going knocking on team owners' doors. For 2 years, he went to all the races, couldn't afford a hotel, so he slept in his car and at the track. And he went to all the team owners, haulers and stuff, and said, "Hey, my name is Dylan Murry. Can I drive your car?" And they're like, "Do you have any money?" And he's like, "No, I don't." I got Formula Ford. Just what more do you want? I'm like, well, get out of here. So he dealt with that for 2 years. Finally, somebody said yes, and his first ride was in the GTP car at the 24 Hours of Daytona.
Oh, wow.
Going from zero to the top right away. So he got one chance to do that at Daytona and did well, and then the rest was history after that. And he was so close to just giving it up and starting his own carpet cleaning business. Him and one of his other buddies that was trying to race and make it as a racer too, they already had their whole business draft and everything to start carpet cleaning and everything. And right when that happened, when he got the okay, drive my car, that was kind of the tipping point in his career. So so since then he's been racing, right? He's been doing factory stuff. He's retired now.
Right.
And I was fortunate enough to always have grown up into it. So I kind of knew everybody in the racing world through him, really. And so it's really been, for me, it's just been such a big part of my life the whole time. I started when I was 5 in go-karts. And then, went to Legends Car, that kind of went the NASCAR path for a little bit, and the oval stuff. And then after that, some doors opened up in sports car. And it's just been a long enjoying road ever since I was about 5 years old, since I first stepped foot in a go-kart. It's just been awesome since then.
And that's kind of where we all started out, was go-karts.
Right, which whenever I was like 6 or 7, my dad, he always used to race, but like he wasn't nothing big or nothing. He just raced like local go-karts and all that good stuff. And he got me kind of somewhat into it, and I was like, yeah, I like it, but then never really had time with school, so I mean, it's like just fell through. So,
you bring up Road Atlanta. I work as I volunteer a lot with SCCA and cover a lot of the races, and that was my first pro race to flag, was the Petite last year, and that was such a cool experience getting to flag that. You had Jensen.
So you flagged at Petite?
I flagged Petite last year. I was at turn 5. I did all 3. I did the whole five flag.
Turn 5's like the best place.
Oh yeah, because it's right up, coming up. You're coming from down the hill and then straight up the hill.
All the action.
It was such an awesome corner.
Yeah. Turn 5 is like that's it. And which station at 5 was that? Was that like kind of on the outside, or was it?
They were both on the outside, but see, 5 has 3 stations. You got the whole. This where that big. It's now that BMW billboard was.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're coming up, and then you got 5 flag that's kind of way off to the driver's right. You got that gravel trap right there, a little access road.
Yeah.
And then you come up, and then you got 5A right there, just at the top of the hill. And so I've worked all 3 of those, and that was such a blast right there, that corner. 5A is really hard to blue flag because it's blind. You kind of have to watch 5 flag to see when they're putting out the blue flag, because if you can't see, and the GTP cars will be right past the GT cars in an instant, or even the LMP ones past the GT.
No, it's that turn 5 section. It's like, and you're right too. Like, I mean, you see like towards the end of the race too, when it's nighttime, and all the cars are, that's like you're starting to get towards the end of the race. Everybody's getting really aggressive then, so you need to make risky passes, and that's the place to do it. And as a driver too, like that whole section is like, it's at night you can't see anything because you go through like turn 3. And you start to go through turn 4, and you go down the hill. When you go down the hill, that light from turn 3, because they always try to put the lights, going away, like an opposite way. So every time you go down there, you see in your right side mirror this light that's right at the level of the track. So you always think that that's a car, and you're like, you kind of hesitate a little bit before you turn in. And it's like, I mean, you have no idea if it's a prototype pass GT, behind you. You have no idea what's going on there. It's just like, I mean, if there's one place that's just super crazy at the end of the race, it's that place. Of all tracks and everything, it's like, man, you go through there and all the elevation. I mean, as is in the day, by yourself, it's a crazy section. Because I mean, you're going upwards to 160 miles an hour, 100 maybe like 165 there at the end, and then you add nighttime to that. Add 40 other. It's like a zoo out there.
It was something.
On top of it, it's like, I mean, you have the pressure of, if I don't do this, somebody else is going to do it. And, it's like, it's the last race of the season. There's the stakes, they're super high. So it's a fun part of
It's a fun corner.
Yeah. It's kind of similar. You saying, like, somebody's going to do it or nobody's going to do it if you don't do it. Then that's kind of like Daytona 500, when you get 20 to go. Somebody's got to make a move, and once that one person makes a move, somebody's going to go with them. It's a chain reaction. Or you're just gone.
Yeah, and I remember one of my first experiences with that at Atlanta was when my first Petit Le Mans. So I had the sunset stint, and so we were fighting. I think we were second, and the 74 car was leading. And I remember we were in, there was like 3 or 4 cars nose to tail at that point, and right at sunset. And when the sun starts to come down, in your brake zone for turn 5, you start to go back up, and you're looking dead on into the sun. You can't see anything there. Like, I mean, not a single thing. So you're literally like, like Talladega Nights, when they like put the blindfold on Ricky Bobby and like, drive, feel the car and drive. It's basically that, where it's like you go through, you're timing it. And you hope you don't end up in the gravel. Because it's literally, I mean, you go through there and it's like, okay, I can maybe take it a little bit easier through there, but I know the guy in front of me and the guy behind me is probably not going to take it easy, so I have to go. And they're thinking the same thing that you're thinking too. So it's, you just, I mean, that section one of the craziest sections in all of motorsports for sure.
Right. Which another question that we have for you here is, with you working as a driver coach and driver development coach, how does that like help you become a better driver yourself?
It makes you kind of think about the physics and makes you think about, I guess, the reasoning behind why you do what you do. And then you can take that to kind of learn on yourself too, right? So if you have, if you're coaching someone and you overlay the data and you see like, okay, maybe I'm a little bit faster going into the corner, they're a little bit faster coming out, but all in all, I gained, a little bit of time on them. And you start to look at the reasoning behind that. You start to look at the throttle trace and the brake trace and say, okay, well, this is exactly why, and match that with a steering trace and G-force and bumps and all that stuff. So it helps you to understand, the reasoning, the physics reasoning behind why you do what you do works. It also helps you to kind of improve yourself a bit, because, when you're looking at other people's data, and sometimes, especially if you're comparing your data with another pro driver, that's when it's like huge, because now you're coaching each other, right? If you're co-driving with another pro, they might be, faster in turn 1, you might be faster in turn 2, and then they're faster again in 3, and blah, blah, blah. It totals up to be, it's like, each corner might be like a couple hundredths at most, right?
Right.
But you start to total that up, and it's like, okay, well, hang on. If I did what you're doing in turn 1, you do what I'm doing in turn 2, and you keep doing that throughout the whole lap, then that's when it's like, okay, well, that 100th in turn 1, and that 100th in turn 2, and that 100th in turn 3, all of that is then going to add up. You get, like, if you're at Sebring, 17 corners, that's almost 0.2 of a second right there.
Right.
And Lord only knows that 0.2 is huge in racing.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel like going back to the coaching side is like, the more you do coach other drivers, the more you kind of have an understanding of what the data looks like, and how to really understand, like, if your co-driver is faster than you in a corner, how to understand exactly what's going on, as opposed to just saying, they're faster in, slower out. Now I just got to bury the car into the corner a bit better. But then you can look at all of the brake trace and the throttle trace and steering trace and all of that stuff that adds up to see exactly what they're doing, when and why it works. I think all that kind of just helps to put everything together, to just understand the physics behind it. Because I always say that motorsports is physics displayed as an art, and that's really what it is. It's like, because you look, I kind of relate it too, of like, you look at basketball players, right? To be a professional basketball player, you have to have a skill set and the determination to train, right? But you also have to be most likely extremely tall, and if you're a swimmer, you have to have short legs and a long torso, and so on for all these other sports. But with racing, the lighter you are, the better. But in general, it be more of technique as opposed to your genetic build. And so all of that kind of adds up to where it's like, okay, well, now I have to kind of understand this technique and not just say like, oh, he's got, he's taller than I am, or he, whatever it is. It's like it comes down to a lot of technique for that.
Yeah.
So. But yeah, I think that, looking at all of the data and video and stuff when you're coaching other drivers, it helps a ton to kind of understand, what the physics are of motorsports, and how it kind of all ties together. And a really good example is when I was racing at Daytona, my first time in an LMP2 car, when I was co-driving with Guido Vandergaard, and going into turn 1 at Daytona. Because I'm used to, when you're in a race car, you're always trying to be like right at that limit of brake pressure, right? You want to be right at the limit of locking up the brakes. And first time in the P2 car, I go into turn 1 at Daytona, and Guido was a little bit quicker than me going into turn 1. And I'm wondering why, or all the way through turn 1, actually. I'm wondering why, because I'm looking at our brake trace, and it's like, okay, I'm putting in, let's say 70 bar brake pressure, and you're only putting in 50 bar brake pressure.
Wow.
But you're still braking later than me and carrying more speed going through the corner.
Right.
Why is that? And you start to look at the physics behind it, and talking with the engineer. That's where communication with the engineer comes in too. Is you start to really look into it, and it turned out that most of the reasoning, there's a lot of reasons behind it, but a couple of things is like when I was putting in too much brake pressure, that car is very sensitive to ride height changes and tire temperature. So the two things that happened was my tire temperatures started to go up a little bit. So when I go through the corner, I didn't have as cool of tires as Guido did. So he could carry, it was like half a mile an hour or a mile an hour faster going through the minimum corner speed of turn one because of the tire temp. But then also the ride height change, because I'm so heavy on that on the brakes, it makes the nose dive a little bit more. And just that little bit of extra ride height change in the front. Okay, well now my aero was completely messed up because that's why you have, even like if you're driving a prototype and you make a rake change of 1 millimeter, like that's huge. Like I can't tell you how it feels. Like it's like just massive change. And so just that little bit of extra brake pressure that I had then goes into be like, okay, well now I lost a little bit of downforce because of that. So it's the combination of just that little bit, that maybe 1 millimeter ride height change in the front, in addition to the cooler tires, helped him to carry that extra speed going through turn one. So it really helps to just kind of really look into detail. And a lot of times it's not apparent. You have to really dive into why, like what's going on here.
There's always a bigger picture to than what it seems.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's 30,000 parts on a race car
at minimum.
It's like there's so many different things that can happen, and how many different ways can those 30,000 parts move?
Yeah, like one little bolt goes out, it's gonna kill the whole car.
Yeah, exactly.
And turn one's you're coming real hard corner because you're coming off that banking and from 32 degrees to practically flat, because the whole infield's a whole flat section until you get off of turn 6 back on the NASCAR 1 and 2.
Yeah, well, in turn one's even like as you go into turn one, it's kind of off camber a little bit because the paving there is kind of like crowned just a little bit. So as you go in on the right side, you're like off camber, and then you cross over the seam in the center, and it's like this little bump right there. So you have to actually count on that correction there too, because you go over that little bump there. And you kind of take just a little slight steering angle out, maybe if you need to, just breathe out of the brakes just a little bit. But yeah, I mean, you're right. It's that turn one it's such a unique corner because it looks like it's a basic hairpin. Not.
And that's what a lot of drivers when they first get to do the road course, they think it's all hairpins and one chicane, and most of it's full throttle. But with the way the track is, it's a lot more than that. And then you put into the time of 24 hours. A stint at 2-3 in the morning is a lot harder than one of the first stints at 1 or 2 in the afternoon.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I mean, the temperature and all of that stuff. And it also feels like, I don't know, at like the 2 a.m. stints, the 3 a.m. stints, it's like everything just feels so much quieter. It's like it's so much more peaceful. It's like, you're just out there. I don't know if it's because there's no wind, really. You don't feel the car moving around as much with the wind. There's not as many fans out, so there's not light beaming into the car. And by that point, a lot of the cars have probably retired from the race. Probably at 5 to 10 cars that have retired since then. So you're a little bit less traffic too. A lot of people are in for maybe brake changes if it's halfway through. So it just feels like super quiet when you're out there at that stint. I think any driver will tell you the two best stints are that 2 a.m. stint and the sunrise stint, and it's just, there's nothing like that.
I was fortunate enough. I worked at 24 this year, had the sunrise stint, and that was really awesome to see. Just seeing that in person right there right next to the track with the cars going by. Because usually I'm at the hotel or at home watching it, and then I'm just now getting to the track about 7, 8 in the morning. Daytona's an awesome track. That's the one on the list I think everyone should do if they want to race, is do Daytona. Is do 24 hours.
It really is. It's and one of the coolest things is when you're like in the infield, in like watching the cars come out of turn 3. Because it's super quiet. Like you hear him come into turn 3. Turn 3 is the international horseshoe, the right-hander, and it's like super quiet going in, and they just make that rotation off pedals, and then all of a sudden you just hear like this like coming out of the corner. It's so cool.
I had turn 4, which was the kink, and then going into the Western Horseshoe this year, and that was at the 24. I worked both the roar and had, on the first 2 days, I was at turn 1, 2, and 2A, and then on the Sunday for the we had, I think, 2 sessions that day. I did the chicane. We had the VPCR race and the qualifying. And the chicane there, you know, when the GTP cars are turning in, they're looking straight at you and haven't even hit the brake yet coming into the chicane. And that was just the power on them. You could feel the Cadillac when it would finally hit the gas back. It would shake the whole ground right there. And that was just a really cool experience seeing that thing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's you brake so late going in the bus stop now. I mean, it's just, I mean, the amount of aero those cars have is just, I mean, I remember when I first went to Daytona, I was in the GT4, and I mean, you're braking that car, I think it was like the 250 marker, maybe 300 marker, something like that. And then you go into a GT3 and you're braking at like the 250, 225 maybe. And then a P3, and you're braking at like the 175, and then P2, it's like you're braking at your turn-in point. New car, it's just like, you know, you
got to relearn it.
The car can take it, but you don't know until you try it.
Yeah.
You know, we've looked at your career, and we see a lot of the trophies around you. What would you say is your biggest achievement up to this point in your career?
Well, so actually, these trophies, these are actually my dad's. Yeah, those aren't mine. I only have a couple of IMSA trophies. I usually give all of my trophies to the crew. And so I honestly maybe have like 3 from IMSA. I still have all my go-kart trophies and everything. Yeah. I try to give all my trophies to the crew because they work 10 times harder than any of the other drivers out there do. Yeah. So, but no, you know, talking about accomplishments and stuff is I think, you know, one of the biggest things that one of the most emotional ones was winning Daytona in 2020, I think it was. That one was like, I mean, we worked so hard, I mean, for 2 years, because, I mean, the first year we went to Daytona, it was in the Mercedes with Riley Motorsports, and the first year we went there, and we had a rock hit the oil pan, I think, and just, like, instantly ended our race. We probably could have won that one, too, if not finished at least second or third. And then, you know, we just worked so hard on that car, testing, you know, for a year straight. Yeah. And we got that car so good. And it was like, finally, you know, I think we won, I think at Watkins that year. And then we won the Sebring Encore. And then we go into Daytona. And it's like, yeah, like all those races are cool, but like, to win Daytona is like, it's always something that I really wanted to do. And so it's, that one was super, super emotional because it's like, I mean, we fought so hard for that. And it's cool too to win at Daytona because you have the roar that leads up for so long to that race. And it's like, I mean, you're just there for 2 weeks, 3 weeks straight. And it's like that whole, you know, team effort. You know, you go through the roar, you have like 3 days off to rebuild the car, and then you go back into the race weekend, and it's like, I mean, it's absolutely crazy. So I think winning that one was truly special.
And I think any win at Daytona is really special. It don't matter, you know, from like the kart week all the way up to IMSA or Daytona. Daytona win's a Daytona win. You can't get any better than Daytona, other than maybe like your home track.
Yeah, home track, but Daytona, it's like, you know, it's similar feeling to like Indy, where it's like you go there, it's like the amount of history that was there, you know, all the people that have been there and raced there and all that stuff. I mean, it's absolutely crazy.
You walk through the tunnel first time, you kind of feel a sense, you know, like this is where, you know, some of the biggest names in racing have raced and won, and that's one of the cool things about Daytona, I think.
Yeah. I went to the 500 a couple years ago, and the first time that we drove through the tunnel that day, because we had infield parking, and we drove through the tunnel, and I was like, so this is how the drivers feel every time they come to Daytona. But I was a fan sitting there having that same feeling, and it was a lot to handle.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot of pressure
you don't really get to enjoy it too much because you're always super focused. So it's like you go there, half the time you don't even realize you're at Daytona until the race is over. Right. Like you go there, it's like everything's so intense. First race of the season, a lot of the times you're working with a new team, so you're trying to learn all the mechanics names and all the team and everything. and working with your new co-drivers. So it's like a lot of times you don't even really get to
experience.
I guess, enjoy being in Daytona. It's just always just so.
It's a blur the
weekend.
weekend.
The car's new too. You're trying to figure out the car. So, but it's definitely one of the best. One of my favorite places to go.
Right. And, you kind of touched on something though. We were going to kind of bring. We've seen you drive in a lot of different things in your career, from GT4 to P3 and P2. What were kind of some of the differences between, I think people really got to see your big career side in P2 and P3. What were kind of some of the differences between the cars there, other than, like the braking points?
Yeah, it's, going throughout my career, obviously I started in go-karts, and then to learn to go from go-karts to cars, what we did, it definitely wasn't a rental car. Just gonna put that out there. We went to my dad. We got a car, and we drove around go-kart track all day for me to learn front brakes. Because go-karts don't have rear brakes. So for me to learn all 4 brakes, we took that thing to go-kart track. I mean, all day, beat the crap out of it, just braking nonstop. The brakes would heat up so much they would start to, the fluid would start to boil and stuff.
Oh wow!
So we didn't have any stuff. So we found a garden hose, and we would take the garden hose and just spray down the brakes and stuff for 10 minutes, and then they're cooled off enough. You go back out, you do it again for a little bit, and try it again. So we did. That was kind of the first kind of intro of okay, this is the difference between just rear brakes in a go-kart and all 4 brakes, and to kind of get that feeling. It took me a while to get that feeling, and then after that we go, from the oval legends cars stuff to now the sports cars side of things, and that wasn't a huge difference, I wouldn't say. I mean, it's obviously a little bit different to drive a GT4 than it was the NASCAR K&N stuff. Right. Because it's just a much lighter car and everything. Not as much power, but much lighter, a lot more aero and stuff. And so that was not a huge change. But then going into a prototype the first time was at Road Atlanta for me in an LMP3 car. And I remember it was I was 18 at that point, and I was going through turn 1. It was just a test day, going through turn 1 at Road Atlanta, which is obviously naturally a pretty fast corner. Every single time it was I was going a little bit quicker. I had no idea how much speed it could take through there, and it really, really surprised me how much faster it can go through high speed corners. And it took me a while to get used to understanding that okay, I can carry this many G-forces in turn 1 and through the S's and stuff, but when I get to turn 7, I can't carry those G-forces because I don't have that aero. So that's what took a big amount of time to learn going from GT to prototype was okay, you can't really do the same thing in turn 7 that you do in turn 1. It doesn't work. And so then, after a couple years of driving the P3 car, I finally got the chance to hop in a P2. And that was a much bigger difference than I thought. Not speed-wise. Yeah, it's a little bit faster. But you don't really notice the speed difference that much. It's just more of the technique was so different because the P2 is such a longer car. It's such a, it really, it's not a heavy car per se, but it feels heavy when you're trying to turn into slow corners because the wheel length is so long that it takes turn 7. It's it takes so long to turn in. That you have to turn in super early and slow. So it's just a lot of different fundamental techniques. And before I drove the P2, right, I'd never driven carbon brakes before. And nobody told me that carbon brakes take a lap or 2 to heat up, and if you don't heat them up, then you have absolutely no brakes and your foot goes to the floor. So I didn't know that. So I go out, my first time was the brakes were hot, right? And because Guido was out there and stuff, and so I got used to just hot brakes. Okay, that's cool. No big deal. And then the first time I drove cold brakes and cold carbon brakes was at Sebring. We did the practice there, and I went out first, and brakes were cold, and my foot's going to the floor, going into turn 3, coming out of pit lane. I was oh my God, this is not going to end well, because it just will not stop. I never went off track, but it was holy cow. And I talked to my dad after, I'm what just happened? And it was oh yeah, that's what happens with carbon brakes when they're cold. And I didn't realize too that even at night, if you come into the pit box to do like fuel or tires or something at night, that's enough to change the temperature in the brakes so much that your first couple corners, first couple brake zones, it takes so long. Even like, you know, if you're under caution too, you just have to constantly heat up the brakes and stuff. So that was a big learning curve for me, to be able to keep the brake temperatures up when you're under caution, when you're, you know, coming into the pit box and stuff. Something that you have to deal with carbon brakes that I never had to deal with before.
And last question that we have here for you, we have, was your future in your career, like, I mean, obviously you've already won Daytona, you've already
had podiums at some of the biggest races here in the U.S.
Where do you see your career going in the future? Like, you plan on staying with the driver development or back in a car?
You know, I want to, obviously I'll take almost any opportunity that comes my way.
Right.
But I really want to I've always wanted to win Daytona, Le Mans, and Sebring. Those are like the big, you know,
Triple Crown.
Right. And so that's something that's always been there. But I just want to go as far as I possibly can, you know, while I'm in my peak in racing, and just kind of take it as far as I can, and you know, keep pushing and see, you know, where it leads me to, and, you know, going to all the races and networking and everything, just trying to see what will come of it. And just kind of keep going from there, because, you know, you never know where it could lead. And just, you know, from like the personal side of it, just trying to become the best driver possible.
Right.
Because that's, you know, winning is like, yeah, okay, you can win. You have to be really good to win, but also, you know, you have to have a lot of luck too.
Right.
So
absolutely.
it's like, you know, as long as I know that, like, my part, that I've given, you know, everything that I have, you know, and that's not just, you know, being a fast driver. That's also, you know, boosting team morale and, you know, doing every possible thing that contributes to the whole. You know, it's like that kind of is the direction that, like I said, I mean, any seat that I can take, any ride that I can take. But yeah, it's definitely, you know, something that it's like, yeah, it'd be great to win all these races, but I want to know that, you know, if I win it, I want to know that I gave my absolute all.
Right.
Because if I win it, and it's like, you know, there's been some races where it's like, you know, you win it, but it's like, oh man, I could have, you know, done better here or here. But there's other races where it's like you might finish third or fourth or fifth just because of bad luck. But it's like, man, I was really on it then. It was like, that was, you know, from my performance side and the team's performance side, like, we were really, really good. But it just, you know, luck wasn't on our side for that.
Right. Which, that's another thing too. Whenever you're running an endurance race, it's like, oh, I've done my part. Now I got to trust that my teammates will do their part and keep us up here.
Right. Yeah. And that's where, you know, that boosting that team morale comes from too, is, you know, as a driver, part of your job is to also be like, you know, not, I wouldn't say team leader per se, but to really just bring that morale and that spirit to the team and guide that, you know, spirit of the team and motivation of the team to where everybody works together fluidly and seamlessly, so that we can all, you know, go in as one piece into the race and do the best that we possibly can.
Right. Well, Dylan, we sure thank you for your time.
Absolutely.
And all this great insight, man.
We've learned a lot on it. You know, so, you know, racing for most people is a lot more than what they really think. It's not about just driving fast and going in a circle. There's a whole, you know, you get a whole list of things that have to happen for a team to be successful and be able to make it to the race each and every race. But it was awesome to get to talk to you and get to know a little more about your story. We hope that some people, you know, when they watch it, you know, they'll learn something new that they didn't maybe know initially.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad I could be a part of this deal and be part of the first one.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
we hope to have you back. Come back.
Yeah. Congrats to you guys for starting this up.
I appreciate it. And best of luck to you on where your career takes you.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Dylan.
Thank you, Dylan.
All right.
Take care.
Guys.
Bye.
All right.
Bye.